Hey, welcome to the All Together podcast. My name is Bianca, and I am your podcast host. I know as well as anyone that life can be messy when you are following God, figuring out relationships, and learning how to be a healthy adult. I hope this podcast encourages you, makes you laugh, and helps you grow a little closer to Jesus. Oh, I'll be spilling all the tea, so get your cups ready. Hello, guys. Welcome back to the All Together podcast. I am just super pumped with how season 2 is recording and filming. It's also super exciting because we are officially all on video. So if you're watching right now on Spotify or YouTube, hey, what's up? You see me in person now. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah, guys, I'm super excited about season 2 because I feel like I've kind of gotten to this rhythm now where I kind of know there's going to be 6 episodes each season. One episode might be about relationships, singleness, breakups, etc. One might be about ministry life because I was in ministry for 10 years in denominations and church. Another one might be about a health episode because you guys know I love talking about periods and hormonal health, or birth control. But something that one of my sweet spots though with one of these episodes is that we could talk about adulting. And I could not think of a better person to talk about adulting, transitions, change than the one and only Lauryn Ashley. So hey Lauryn, welcome to the All Together podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, it is truly an honor. It really is. So if you don't know, Lauryn and we go way back.
Oh yeah, way back.
As in she was a freshman in college, I was a sophomore, and I was like, hey, you were living off campus at that time. And I had a dorm, and I would always be like, you want to come over and have a sleepover?
Yes,
it was the best
you
time.
made my commuter life so much better because I actually got a little bit of the on-campus experience. So It was great.
Yeah. It really was. And I remember, so I was we were in Impact, which is a college of ministry, and you were just a student at that time, and I was actually on leadership, and I was always spilling you all the tea, as a freshman.
Yes, I don't think I should have known half of the things that I actually did, but it's okay.
But little did she know she ended up being president and etc. So it worked out at the end. So, but yeah, such great memories, honestly.
So fun.
So today we're going to be talking about transition. Some of you guys may know, but I have lived in multiple states up until this point, and I have kind of started over in life over and over and over again. And someone else who's also done the same thing has been you, Lauryn. And so I felt like I wanted to just have a sit-down discussion to talk about change and life. And I think a lot of times, depending on your circle of friends, they might all live in the same region as you, or they might all live in the same city as you. But I think for a majority of people, I think a lot of people end up moving to at least a different city, maybe not a different state. And so I was wondering maybe if you can start off with sharing a little bit about your background. Did you move around a lot as a kid? Were you more in a stable family, etc.? And then kind of maybe how you ended up transitioning to another state.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, growing up, I was born and raised in Akron, Ohio, and I stayed there until I was 24 years old. Literally stayed with my parents in their house until that time, until I got married, essentially. And so I don't really like change. I don't really like transition. So that's why
she doesn't.
Even when I went to college, it was I went to Kent State, which was 25 minutes away. I could drive there every day. Thankfully, Bianca let me stay in her dorm on her twin XL mattress.
Yeah. How did we fit on there again? I literally don't know.
I don't either, but we made it work somehow. And then I got married, and that is what forced me to move. And that's kind of where my transitions came in because I've now been married for 2 years and we've moved 4 times. And so
that's crazy.
4 different cities, 2 different states, but 4 different moves. So it's been a lot of transition in a really short time, especially considering the fact that for the first 20 plus years of my life, I didn't move anywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like transitioning is so hard if you're so used to the same
Yeah,
thing. You did kind of know what you were getting into when you got married, but I don't think you really knew fully
not at all.
like all the changes and stuff because
No.
that four like cities and states in 2 years is actually crazy.
Yeah. And like there were just a lot of unexpected things that came with the moves. Like it was like I knew when I got married, I was moving from Ohio to Florida. And that was like, okay, it's going to happen. But it was just a lot that came with it that I wasn't expecting. Like I was living with my parents, my siblings, and the house was always loud and crazy. And there was always so much going on. It was just so much like background noise, just always things happening. And then I moved to Florida with my husband, and it was just us two, and he worked a lot, and it was silence. And that was really weird for me because it was like I wasn't used to just being in a quiet atmosphere, a quiet place. So there was a lot of unexpected things that came with the expected transition, but I just wasn't expecting them. And then when I experienced them, it just threw me off a lot.
It's interesting because I think sometimes when you think of marriage, you're like, we're going to be together all the time,
Yes.
you know? And that's all I ever hear. They're like, and for me, I'm super independent. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
God, all the time.
same, same. We both have very similar like personality types, and yes,
What do you mean? Like attached to the hip? Oh
yeah,
Lord, I
no,
don't know. I'm like, is this for me?
yeah, no,
But people don't really talk about like, what if your spouse has a different schedule than you?
yes.
Because you work
Yeah, when
nights.
we first got married, he was working a totally different schedule. He worked the overnight shift, and so he had to sleep during the day and then go to work at night. And I worked from home, so it was like I thought going into marriage, it was like we would have all this time together, and that made me
Hmm.
nervous too, because like you said, I was very similar. I like my independence, but that's not what I was expecting when I first got married at
Hmm.
all. And yeah, it was totally different, and nobody warned me for it. Nobody like prepared me for it because it was just it's not very
Yeah.
common to have like such a different schedule when you first get married. But yeah, it was different. It was hard for sure.
Yeah. Or because I feel like, I think of healthcare professionals.
Yeah,
A lot of people work
yeah,
nights, firefighters, pilots. My mom's a flight attendant,
yeah,
so she's gone multiple days out of the
yeah.
week. And I feel like people don't really talk about that transition going as a newlywed,
Hmm.
getting into that schedule. That transition in and of itself is just
Yeah.
crazy. And especially because you were used to being with your family all the
Hmm.
time. You went from that to a completely empty house. I mean,
Yeah.
that must have been a lot to cope.
Yeah, for sure. It was rough, but I think one of the things that helped was leaning on the people around me, even though friends weren't physically there, family wasn't physically there, but constantly keeping up with them and talking with them and like staying encouraged and supported by those people that I had in my life really did help during that time. And I think that's helped with all of my transitions, honestly, because you get into this new environment or you don't know people around you. Maybe in some cases you do, but in all of mine, it's been very new and I haven't had anyone that was familiar around me. And so I had to like hang on to those connections that I had before and yeah, just stay close to them as best as I could. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about when I moved to Minnesota for grad
Yeah.
school. I mean, I didn't know a single person
Yeah.
either. And I think that's when I really got good at connecting long distance
Yes.
with my friends. And so FaceTime became my best friend,
Mm-hmm.
voice notes, calling, group calls. And
Yeah.
I think that's the best way, especially before you actually get involved in community, which
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk about in a second. But I think relying on those friends that you
Yeah.
have coming from a previous community, it's paramount. No, honestly, as you're talking, I realized that I have moved around a lot, but I've always moved to a school. I went to grad school and I saw people every day because of
Yeah.
school, but I think it's so different and I really admire you for this because you went to a whole new place, but like it wasn't for school. It
Yeah.
was because of your husband.
Mm-hmm.
And so realistically, this move was not your
Yeah. No.
choice. Rather than in my case, I felt like the Lord was leading me to go to different
Mm-hmm.
places. But I think that that's also a weird thing with
Yeah.
transition because if your spouse is moving, like you can't. stomp your feet and say
Yeah.
no, and I'm
You have
staying and
you
you're
have to
going. Like,
go.
it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you're single, it's very much like, I don't know, God told me to go. I'm going to pick up my stuff and go.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing because I am way more willing to say yes because it's just me, myself, and
Yeah.
I. But if it's with somebody else, I don't know. That's a whole different
Yeah.
ballgame.
And I think that is a big thing in marriage too. We've moved around a lot, and most of the moves have been because of his job, but some of them have been um, just because we've gotten the option to, and it's something that I wanted. And maybe Desmond didn't, but we prayed about it and we felt this was an okay thing to do.
I want to camp here, honestly, a little
Yeah.
bit because there is something about asking God before the
Yeah.
move. It sounds elementary to be like, don't forget to ask God
No.
before you're trying to move. But like, if you don't ask the Lord, hey, God, can I move here? And you don't wait for him to say yes and to give that peace,
Yeah.
do not
Do
move.
not move. And honestly,
It's not worth
it's
it.
not worth it at all. And I say we moved 4 times in 2 years. And one of those moves, I can honestly say we did not pray about. And even looking back, like I see how, had we prayed about it, just things would have been so much different.
Yeah.
Because when I first moved to Florida, I moved into the apartment that Desmond was staying in before he was there. And I just like, it was like a guy's apartment. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to live here. And
Yeah.
essentially, once the lease ended, I was like, okay, it's time to move. It's time to move to an apartment that I like. It's time to move to a different part of the city. All this stuff, and it was just like me, me, me. And we had just gotten married, so Desmond's just like, okay, well, you want to move?
Yes,
Yes,
queen.
he's like, well, you want to move, and so I guess we're just gonna move. And
That is
it was
hilarious.
the hardest process to find an apartment. The apartments were
Mhm.
crazy expensive. We picked an apartment that was ridiculously over our budget. We should not have lived there. The move was literally the
Mm.
hardest move ever. Like looking back, it was like Bianca, it was bad. I'm surprised that our marriage even like survived this move because of how bad it was. Like it was terrible. And then like
That's crazy.
literally maybe weeks after we had moved to this new apartment, we got the news from his job that the Orlando office had opened up and that was happening. And so looking back, I know I was even talking to Desmond about this a few days ago. It's like, had we have prayed before that move, I think it would have been so different. I don't think we would have
Yeah.
made the move because we ended up moving to Orlando like 3 months after that. And so it was like
That's
we had
crazy.
this crazy move essentially for no reason because we ended up moving again very
Yeah.
shortly after. And it was just bad. Like so much and it goes beyond like the financial like burden that move was, but just
Yeah.
emotional, like everything was impacted. So
Yeah.
much stress on both of us. And
Mhm.
looking back, I don't think God intended for us to do that move at all. But
Yeah.
that's what happens when you don't pray about things before you do them. It's not like God just like punishes you for it, but you can see how his hand is just not in it, essentially. And that's what happened, for sure.
I think like a practical for me right now is I am currently with my family in
Yeah.
Ohio, and the way that I don't want to be here is crazy. I'm like,
Yeah.
I like came back kicking and screaming. I knew the Lord called me to come
Yeah.
back, but I came back kicking and screaming. I was like, I do not want to be
Yeah.
here. I've been here a year now, but I see like why God wanted me to come
Yeah.
back, like to really like strengthen my relationship with my
Yeah.
parents, with my siblings, have a lot of like downtime to rest and
Mm-hmm.
heal. I had just gotten out of a pretty bad
Yeah.
breakup at that time and he healed me of so much this year,
Yeah.
honestly. I'll probably end up talking about it. But the way that I'm trying to move back to Dallas, I I'm like every time I go, I'm like, Lord, just give me the sign. Give
Yeah.
me the sign. I'm ready. Lord, I am ready. I am your
Yeah.
servant. Let me go. And I just came back from Dallas like a couple weeks ago. I remember praying. I was like, Lord, like this is the week that you're gonna tell me to move back,
Yeah.
right? And the way that I came back to Cleveland and I was like, no peace. I don't know why
Yeah.
the Lord doesn't want me to I was sure that this was gonna be the time that he was like, "Okay, let's go." But the way that I have no peace, the way that I feel a reservation to even consider moving, that I'm supposed to be here right now, yeah, I just
Mhm.
think that it's wisdom, you
Yeah.
know? And nobody can tell you really. It's literally between you and the Lord about this movement if you're married, like you and your
Yeah.
spouse and the Lord, because I mean, people might be like, just move, come on.
Yeah.
But if you feel this tugging in your heart where you're, I don't feel
Yeah.
transition. Because I'm really big on that. I
Mhm.
usually feel transition's coming. It's just this weird
Right. Yeah.
revelation. I'm like, I know I'm moving soon.
Yes, you do.
Not, I know. I'm like, why does that happen? But the way that I haven't felt that when I've been here yet,
Yeah.
and I've been begging the Lord, I'm like, please just tell me the transition is coming.
Yes.
The end is near, right? You know? But I just think it's wisdom to
Yeah.
say, Lord, I trust you. And I was listening to a song earlier today. It's like we say yes to your will and to your way. Like I want to be obedient and I want to say yes to you, Lord, even if I feel uncomfortable with where I'm at right
Yes.
now and I don't really want to be here to be honest.
Mhm.
But I know that if I say yes to your will, you will bless it. And I don't know what's around the
Yeah.
corner. And I don't know what would happen if I moved. I don't think it'd be hell and destruction, but
Right.
I just think that kind of like you said, it's just harder. You feel like you're
Yes.
going through mud when you
Yes.
do a transition in that way, but it's to stop, to pause, and to pray. So I love
Mhm.
that you and Desmond did that.
Yeah. We had to learn the hard way, but we figured
Yeah.
it out. And like you
Yeah.
were saying earlier, like I think the big thing about transition is that it's just really uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that we have to be okay with is being uncomfortable because that is
Yeah.
honestly like where the issue happened, where I moved from one apartment to the other and unnecessarily. It was because I was just uncomfortable and I didn't want to deal with it. And so I was like, let's just
Yeah.
move, let's just do it. But no, sometimes God wants us to be uncomfortable because that is where we trust him the most. When we
Yep.
don't have it all together and don't have everything in our control, we don't have a choice but to rely on him for everything and trust him. And I know you and me both have this very type A personality type where it's like we like to
Yes.
know what's going on and have our plans and just have things in our control. And sometimes it's not that sometimes it's just not the case, and that's okay because we get to rely
And that's how
on God.
God gets us. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to get you guys to move around. Then you'll
Yes.
really be dependent on
Oh
me.
yeah.
And
Yes.
it's like, but I don't want to, you know? Yeah. No,
For
it's
sure.
so, yeah. I think that's the hardest part for type A people and people
Hmm.
who like to plan their life a little bit
Yeah.
is life does not always go the way it's planned. So, we both have left areas that we've loved, and I remember very distinctly my grieving process even though I
Yeah.
knew God was calling me to go to a different place. I remember really taking the time to meet up with people to like enjoy the place that I was in.
Yeah.
I made sure not to rush the
Yeah.
process. And so I kind of want to talk about that because I think a lot of people are like, all right, I'm getting up and moving, but then you don't allow yourself to
Yeah.
grieve. Even if you want to leave, it's still that grieving process that I still think needs to
Oh
happen. I
yeah.
think people just don't do it well. So do you want to explain kind of what you did when you left Orlando?
Yeah, so leaving Orlando, like I said, was so hard. One of the hardest things I've ever done, but I think towards the end it was a lot of connecting with the people who I had like strong connections with. So like going out to lunch, going out to eat, going out for ice cream, tea, whatever it was, like just connecting with the
Hmm.
people as much as I could. Even letting people know like because I had only been there for like a year, so some of my relationships weren't as grounded as I think I would have liked them to be, which was also really hard for me to
Yeah.
leave because I was like almost there and I felt like I was getting super close to people and then I was just gonna be out of the equation. And so even during that transition, it was really big for me to let people know how much they meant in my life and
Hmm.
how important it was for me to stay connected with them even after I moved. And so that was like a big thing, talking to people and letting them know, hey, like I still want to work on this. I still want to be connected.
Hmm.
And like we were talking about before, you have to stay in contact with some people from your past experiences and stuff, because when you
Yeah.
transition, in my case, to a place where I don't know anyone, it's like I have to
Mm-hmm.
lean on those relationships that I already have. And so I think a big part of like ending that experience in Orlando was like solidifying those relationships and letting people know how much they meant to me, and like, yeah,
Yeah.
just staying in touch.
That's so good. That's literally what I did when I left Minnesota.
Yeah.
Is my friends like threw this little goodbye
Aw,
gathering.
yeah.
It was on top of a rooftop.
Aw.
It was really sweet. It was 8 of us. We sat down in a circle, and I literally went one person at a time. I remember this now. Oh, it was so tender.
Aw.
I went one person at a time, and I told them what they meant to me, and
Yes.
I was sobbing the whole time. It
Yeah.
probably took like 2 hours, but I was like pointing out example. It was just so
Yes.
sweet, and it was so healing for my heart to be like, I know that these people are going to stay in my life,
Yeah.
and it's not a goodbye. It's just like, see you
Oh,
later.
yeah. And like,
And now I come back to Minnesota all the time, and I see those
yeah.
friends, and so I'm able to cultivate and continue that and have a place to stay
Yes. Oh, yeah.
and go see friends, that really made an impact on your life.
Yeah. And like I said, when I was in Orlando, I had a really good church community. And so I kind of had something similar where it was very important that these people like knew how important they were in my lives and stuff. So when I was transitioning from Orlando, as I was getting prepared to move and all this stuff, I was complaining to this lady at my church who I love. And I was telling her I'm just tired of starting over and having to start over again and again. And she gave me some really good advice. She was like, don't look at it as starting over, just look at it as continuing on. And that was like really helpful for me, because I feel with all of these moves, like I feel like I just have to start from square one, and I'm turning my back on all of the people who I knew from my past and can't talk to them. Can't, not the case. Like, you're not starting over like from a blank slate. Like, you're just continuing on the journey that God has for you. And all those people from your past experiences and the past places that you've lived are still in your life. They're just not right in front of your face, but you still have them. You can still connect with them. Like you said, visit them, stay with them, because hotels are
Literally,
expensive. Yeah.
they are. Take advantage.
Yes. So it's like you're just
No,
continuing on your
yeah,
journey in a new
that's so
place.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously you can't keep up with 15 friends in each
Yeah.
place. Now I've lived in multiple places. I can't keep up, but I
Yeah.
can keep up with 2 or 3.
Right.
And I think, and then there are, not have caught up with them, but then when you see them, you can catch up.
Yes.
And it's not that serious, Like, I
Yeah.
just think that, yeah, like, this is the time to do that. And you never know if your paths will cross again. So, Lauren,
Yes.
I feel like we have talked a lot about the hardships of transition.
Yeah.
But there are really good pros to transitioning as well,
There
and also
are.
just moving to a different state. So I feel like we should give some practical advice. We can probably put our brains together and think of some great advice.
I think so.
Like, if anyone is considering to move, or maybe they're afraid because they've lived in the same place all their life,
Yeah.
I maybe give some advice on that.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest perks of just transitioning is all of the new experiences and new people you get to meet. Like, you're in a new
Yeah.
place. Like, I just know when I was in Ohio, there were different events than there were in Miami. Like, there's so many different,
Yeah.
yeah, like there's so many different things. Like, I mean, and honestly, so many better things that you can experience once you move. And like a big thing for me that allowed me to experience these things was getting over the hurdle of like going places by myself. So I feel like that is like a really big thing. When you transition, like there's so many opportunities when you're in a new place to explore and just find new things to do, but you kind of have to get over the
Yeah.
hurdle of not wanting to feel awkward or not wanting to be seen a place by yourself, but you kind of just have to do it and have an amazing experience and meet people while you're there and have fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I talked about in my singleness podcast in
Yeah.
season 1, episode 1. If you haven't watched it, you should go watch
Oh,
it.
yeah.
But like, but you're married, and like you still are giving the same advice. So
Yeah.
I think it's like, if we can start really getting used to being okay with being by ourselves and being
Mhm.
comfortable in our own company, I think if you move to a different state, even if you're married or if you're single, I feel like that is such a game changer.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, yeah, there's so much stuff to do. There's so many places to explore. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's the curiosity. If you're not curious, when you move to a new place, if you're like, I'm going to stay home all day, I mean, you'll never really truly get to experience life to the fullest.
Yeah, and I think you can kind of find yourself more during a transition than you would when you're around all the people who you're close to and people who you've
Yeah.
known for your whole life. But when you get out and you're somewhere by yourself or with very few people, like it was just me and my husband, so it was just us and we just had to figure it out. And I felt like I just found out so much more about myself and what I was
Yeah.
capable of and what I could actually go
Hmm.
through and just find out so much more about yourself. So it's like getting out there and like being out of your comfort zone and on your own can just reveal so much about you that you didn't even know was in you. So
That's
good.
good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite part about moving to a different state is just, I don't know, you just get to, just like you said, like you get to experience a different view. You get to
Mm-hmm.
experience, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I living in Minnesota, I experienced lake hopping. Like they
Yeah.
have so many lakes. I would bring a swimsuit with me after work and just jump. I would literally write in on Google lake and I would go to a new
Yes.
lake and I would just jump in. And that was I lived my best life. I
Yes.
miss Minnesota, honestly.
Yeah.
But then when I moved to Dallas, like I learned like the super big city life
Yeah.
and like the fast pace. I hated the traffic though. But like
Yeah.
I learned that and I realized, oh, I don't know if I'm really that into like all that traffic,
Yeah.
even though I want to move back to Dallas. But like I don't know if it's a long-term thing,
Yeah. Right.
Or like moving back to Ohio as
Yeah.
an adult, it's different too. So I just think take
Mm-hmm.
a leap of faith. If you feel your heart stirring right now, like, man, maybe, or I've always wanted to move,
Yes.
like
Do
go do
it.
it, but don't forget to ask God first.
Yes. Get his guidance, make sure it's in line with what he wants you to be doing, but go for
Yep.
it. And I think that reminds me of another thing that's just a perk of moving is like you kind of have more time on your hands, you're less
Mhm.
busy, and with that, you
Yeah.
get more time to spend with God. So it's a good
Yep.
opportunity for you to just grow your relationship with him too, because I know when I'm like in the beginning of like a new transition or going through something different or just moved to a new state, it's like I'm not overwhelmed by busyness as much as I
Yeah.
was when I was around friends and family and people all the time. Like my schedule is pretty empty now. So I have a lot more time to
Hmm.
spend with God and actually grow my relationship with him in ways that I couldn't when I was in Orlando or in South Florida. It just it's a good opportunity to grow your relationship with him for sure.
Can, if you're really considering to move though, there's something about you only live once. There's
Yeah.
something about you never knowing what's on the other side of your yes. I remember when I felt the prompting to move to Dallas, I didn't know. I literally said, Lord, I feel like I'm supposed to move there. I had never been at that point. And I was like, I'm not moving until I get a job or
Mm,
something. Like, you got to give me a reason.
right.
And the reason ended up being that he wanted me to go spend 9 months with him in ministry school. So I think if you feel that prompting, start asking God, go do a 3-day fast. Like, that's what I did.
Yeah,
I
that's
just did
great.
like, I did, like no food for 24 hours or something.
Yeah.
And I just feel like really ask God, Lord, I feel this prompting, and don't sit in fear.
Yeah, that's
Because I think fear is what's going to keep us in 10 years from now. I don't want to be sitting here and I'm like, oh, I really wish I had moved.
mhm.
I want to say, no, I actually did move. And now I know where I want to live.
Yeah.
And, now I know where I want to like really establish my roots, especially as someone in their 20s. This is literally the time.
Yes, for sure. And
So,
you never know how God can use you in a space. Like, it's not that he can't use you where you're already at. Like, he certainly can, but it's like you never know who's in this new place, who you need to connect
yeah.
with, or like who
Yeah.
you need to reach, who will just respond to you differently than they would someone else. You just never know what opportunity God has for you in a new place. So it's like, I think the enemy can use fear to kind of hold you back. And I think that was even the case with me. there were so many times growing up where I feel like I had an opportunity to step out of my comfort zone and embrace this new opportunity or this new area of life that God wanted me to go, but I was afraid. Like, I was afraid of being uncomfortable. I was afraid of not
Yeah.
having everything under my control, like I said. And so I stayed where I was at. And I just think there could have been so many new things, so many things that God could have used me for had I just stepped out and transitioned, moved, done a new thing. There's so much, so much.
And it's not a lost cause
Yeah,
because here you are. Literally, you've
yeah,
been everywhere now at this point.
yes. And I've learned, and now I'm embracing these transitions
Yes.
and, yeah, really learning how to trust God in them because that has been like the biggest thing. Like, honestly, I feel like even looking back and seeing how I was afraid to move or afraid to transition, it's like it came down to a lack of trust. Like, I didn't trust that God was going to be with me in this new place or that he had me, like, and I was going to be fine. But now I see, like, no, I just need to trust him and make this move, and it'll all work out.
That's so good. You better. That is so good. Because the thing is if we let fear control our life, we'll never do
Yeah,
anything. Like, I think about this podcast. Like, I sat on
right.
this project for many years. I
Yeah,
let fear control me and I was afraid, but instead I'm stepping out. It's the same thing with moving, same thing with changing
same
jobs,
thing.
same thing with choosing a spouse. Like, all these things, like, we don't want to be people who live in fear. We want to
Yeah,
be women and men of faith because that's the best place to live. It's in that
yeah.
tension of the unknown, of believing that God has something greater. He has something good for us, no matter what.
Oh, yeah. That's so good. I love it.
Well, Lauren, I have
Yeah.
one question that I ask all my guests at the end, and it is if you could give yourself a piece of advice from like 5, 10 years ago about faith, relationships, or health, what would it be?
Um, I feel like my advice would be, and we talked about this a lot today, that it is okay to be uncomfortable. And that is just, I wish somebody would have like screamed that at me growing up. You
Yeah.
don't have to always be in your comfort zone. You don't always have to hold everything together. You don't have to have it all together because God like holds it all together. Like, he's got it. He's got you. You can take that step, that move, that job, like that
Yeah.
opportunity. You can take it, and we said pray first. That is the biggest thing, but like he will be with you when you do it. And I don't know. I just think that was probably the biggest thing for me, just being okay with being uncomfortable because God will meet you there and he will help you and it'll be okay. So, yeah, that's a big one for
That's really
me.
good. Well, thanks for the advice. And thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining today on the
Yeah.
Altogether podcast. I feel so honored that you could come on here today and you're one of my BFFs
Yes.
and
Uh,
I'm just so thankful for
oh,
you.
yeah. Thank you for having me on. I'm thankful for you too. I love this. I love that you're doing this because I know you've wanted to do it for a long
Thanks.
time. So, yeah, I'm happy to support and help
Oh,
however I can.
thanks, Lauren. All
Yes.
right, guys. Bye. Till next time.